Hello and welcome to Deception Diaries. Absolute, undiluted hell, the last few hours for David Jenkins had been nothing but pain and disbelief. An anonymous email claimed that his beloved wife of 6 years, Lauren, was seen entering a room in a cheap motel last Wednesday afternoon with the same man she was now having lunch with. To say that David was shaken would be a gross understatement. He and Lauren were deeply in love, making love 3 to 5 times a week, and their lovemaking sessions were usually intense and sincere. At just under 30, he thought their activities were energetic and pleasurable for both. However, he couldn't ignore the email or its consequences. So, feeling as tense and agitated as he had never been in his life, he went home that day a changed man. Arriving home around 6 p.m. as usual, he saw Lauren's car already in the driveway. Still in his work clothes, she stood at the sink rinsing vegetables as he entered the kitchen, greeted her hesitantly, and set down his briefcase. "Hi, darling. How was your day?" Lauren dried her hands with a towel before turning to kiss him. David was struck by how carefree she seemed after spending the day with another man. "Great, but there was some bad news about the project we're working on. Looks like I'll have to go to Greensboro on Friday, and I won't be home until around 8 p.m., depending on how the meetings go. And then I'll head straight home." David knew Lauren's work schedule quite well, and he knew Wednesdays and Fridays in the late afternoon were her most flexible times. So, his first thought on how to check the accusations in the email was to make it easier for Lauren. Next Friday, the project crisis meeting and business trip all lies. Instead, he arranged to take a day off on Friday, do some preliminary work, and keep an eye on the motel for Lauren and her lover. "Well, at least you don't have to stay overnight, and we'll still spend the whole weekend together," Lauren suggested. "Since you can't predict when you'll be back home, could you call me when you leave Greensboro? I'll try to prepare dinner as best as I can." David thought for a moment. Yesterday, he wouldn't have noticed or thought twice about how attentive Lauren was trying to make a joint dinner possible despite his unplanned business trip. Now he wondered if she was asking for a 2-hour window to erase any traces of her lover. "Sure, I'll call you when I have a better idea of when I'll leave Greensboro, and I'll call from the road when I know what time I'll be home. Is that okay?" Since the purpose of Friday now is to make it easier for Lauren to deceive, again if it was indeed her in the motel, and if the email was accurate, David wanted Lauren to feel comfortable knowing he wouldn't have the opportunity to catch her. "David, I'm going to prepare dinner and then quickly take a shower. Could you watch this pan for me until I'm back?" Lauren asked, taking her purse and heading upstairs. "Of course, dear." "Don't worry," David replied, thinking to himself, "Strange, I thought she usually left her purse downstairs." Even the shower made him wonder, although not uncommon, she usually didn't shower immediately upon returning home. So while sorting through the mail and stirring vegetables, he nervously pondered whether the impromptu shower was connected to the news in the earlier email. At dinner, David was visibly pensive. "Is something else wrong, honey? Besides the project you mentioned, you seem terribly quiet and almost on another planet," Lauren finally asked, getting concise responses to the questions she asked. "No, sorry, I guess I'm just tired and already thinking about what I need to do tomorrow to get ready for the trip to Greensboro," David said. David understood he needed to act normal to avoid making Lauren think something was amiss. David found it almost amusing what now constituted normal. "My wife might beat me to the punch, or someone with a bad sense of humor might pull a prank on me, or I might become an unwitting victim of email misdelivery. What if it was an entirely different woman and the sender mistakenly took her for my wife? Yesterday, I was confident in my happiness, and today I'm a wreckage of doubts." Dinner was cleared, and after watching some TV, David and Lauren discussed weekend plans before getting ready for bed. David had already mentioned he would go to sleep early since he needed to go to work early to prepare for the trip. The thought of what he would do if Lauren took any steps regarding love with another man tonight tied David's stomach into knots. He thought about Wednesdays and whether there had been any recent patterns in their relationship. With horror, he realized that, according to his recollections, it was about 50-50. Tying it to her post-work shower, he felt in the dark, trying to pin down the deceitful, two-faced donkey. Lauren got into bed first, and when David joined her, she quickly snuggled up behind him, hugging him tightly and reaching to scratch his chest with her nails. "Can I distract you from work for 30 minutes, my love?" Lauren playfully suggested. "How much more can I endure before losing self-control?" He patiently adhered to Plan A and said, "As much as I would like to, dear, neither today nor tomorrow will I be of much use to you. I'm just too preoccupied with this project hanging over me." Saying this, he again couldn't believe how much his life had changed in the 60 seconds it took to read and understand that simple email he received just 10 hours ago. "It's okay, dear. I understand. I just thought that if you were up for it, I would offer you a little well-deserved stress relief." Lauren hugged David tightly, kissed him on the back of the head, wished him a good night, and turned over to the other side. David felt relief and at the same time wondered, what did she mean by "if you're up for it"? David got up and left for work before Lauren woke up, so he avoided further questions or insightful looks. He realized how poorly he was handling the problem, whether real or imagined. Last night reminded him of Poe's The Telltale Heart, and realizing this, he understood that he had to avoid another night of close contact with Lauren. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm planning to work late tonight, preparing for tomorrow's trip and meetings, so don't worry about dinner for me, and I'll probably see you before bedtime." David left in her voicemail around noon. However, Thursday was spent without preparing for business meetings. David was a planner and organizer by nature and profession, so even though he had no undeniable evidence of her infidelity, he wanted to organize everything. He called everyone he could until he found a lawyer who could meet with him the next day and searched the internet for recording devices. Deciding he wanted to buy one, he searched for local stores with similar devices and found one to visit before heading home. David was competent enough in his actual work that no one asked him what was going on, but his heart and mind were clearly somewhere else. He was a little late from work, and then he went to the surveillance equipment store and bought a simple voice-activated pen, which he thought he could hide in Lauren's purse, which usually accompanied her in her office and car. He also brought work home to pretend to prepare for the trip the next day until Lauren went to sleep. "Hi, honey. I'm so glad you're finally home," Lauren said, approaching the door when David arrived around 9 p.m. "How is the project progressing, and how about the trip?" "I think it's not bad since we found out about these new problems. We've allocated more resources to it, so I hope everything will be resolved on Friday." For better or for worse, this is playing with fire, David thought. I wonder if she feels the same way right now. Thursday evening, to David's relief, was a repeat of the previous night, only with hugs. Lauren seemed completely unruffled, and as far as David could judge, behaved towards him the same as before. Figuratively speaking, however, he was such a complete wreck that Lauren probably had no difficulty seeming normal compared to David. That on Friday, rising again at dawn, David checked the pen, placed it in Lauren's purse, and left the house. He spent some time in a cafe, then headed to meet with the lawyer at 10 a.m. David viewed this meeting solely for information gathering, but in the end, he really liked the lawyer. They discussed David's email and his still unconfirmed concerns, as well as the fact that today was a date with a potential lover that David planned to investigate himself. He admitted that he had nothing but this email, so going all in on a private detective or thousands of dollars of surveillance equipment didn't make much sense. From the lawyer, David learned about the typical reality of divorce if it came to that. Without children, no-fault divorce was relatively straightforward, especially considering that David and Lauren had comparable incomes and similar pension plan balances. The house was mostly in debt, so its liquidation would be more of an emotional shock than a financial strain. However, David left the law office in complete bewilderment. How can I even feel this nightmare and think everything won't be so bad? We were supposed to be together forever, until death do us part. David spent lunchtime in a cafe, browsing the internet and continuing to study the procedure for what is called divorce. Websites abound with information on how to detect a cheating spouse, as well as how to avoid detection in an affair, hide income, and how to find it. The most instructive were sites dedicated to why spouses have affairs. Nothing David read touched on Lauren's motivation. This one fact probably led David to secretly hope deep down that all of this was a mistake. They were too close, too deeply in love, too synchronized for it to be true. When he could no longer talk about deception, he packed up and left, heading to the motel. Time seemed to drag slowly, or so it seemed to David, as he drove to the motel mentioned in the email. He realized that if this affair story was indeed true, it was quite possible that Lauren did not always use this Saint motel. If it were true, the entire day could be in vain, and he still wouldn't know for sure. The pen he placed in her purse might eventually bear fruit, but David knew he could no longer bear this uncertainty about the state and future of his marriage. Entering the motel parking lot at 1:40 p.m., he circled around until he found a remote parking spot with a view of most of the rooms and the office. Now he just had to wait. There weren't many people coming and going at the motel, so when the man parked a late-model Acura, visited the office, and then entered a room on the first floor, he seemed vaguely familiar to David. The name didn't come to mind, but Dave felt like he had seen this person before. All of David's doubts ceased, as did his hopes, about 5 minutes later when Lawrence parked next to the Acura. She jumped out with a purse in hand, approached the door of the same room, and knocked. Quickly after a few seconds, the man opened the door, and Lauren entered with familiar ease and confidence. It's all true, David thought, pounding his fists on the steering wheel. How could Lauren do this to me, and why? There was simply no sense or reason in it. David had never felt so blind in his life. The planner and organizer had just had the rug pulled out from under him. David's thoughts raced left, right, up, and down like a roller coaster, and he suddenly realized that he now shared the crumbling fate of a marriage in complete and terrible crisis. Knowing that today was at least a second instance of Lauren's betrayal, and that she had avoided work to do, it made David feel that there was nothing more to gain lurking in the motel. He wasn't going to confront them, pounding on the door that could get unpleasant, and he needed time and space to calm down and prepare for whatever his next steps would be. Then he remembered the pen he placed in her purse and grimaced bitterly. Real-time sound, he thought painfully. Just great. He had the presence of mind to take a few photos of the two cars parked side by side before their love nest and took a close-up of the man's car, including the license plate, before slowly turning towards the exit and back on the road. The destination was not in his mind, but for a while, he just drove aimlessly until he almost ran a red light, narrowly avoiding an accident. This shook him, so he stopped at a brewery and had a beer, trying to gather his thoughts. At first, he thought he had just shifted from idle suspicion to full awareness, but he realized how little he knew at the moment, and he had no idea who this guy was, how long this had been going on, and, more importantly, why. As far as he knew, for 7+ years, he and Lauren had been exclusive, engaged, and then married. He had enough evidence to confront, but it wasn't enough to know whether what Lauren would say would be true. As painful as it would be to listen to the recording of today's daytime rendezvous, he knew he had to wait before retrieving the pen from her purse before saying anything to Lauren. He also knew that he wouldn't be able to be with the enamored Lauren if she were in the mood for intimacy later. After his assumed business trip throughout the week, he had been pushing her away, citing the trip, so his ready-made excuse would disappear, and further rejection of love with Lauren would likely raise her awareness that something was going wrong. So what to do? I need that pen, then I need to quickly confirm that there's something on, and then I could leave the house and stay away for a few days to figure out where I stand. David mused in his mind. With this overall planned and mined out, a cunning thought occurred to David. She thinks I'll arrive later than usual tonight in order to shake her and her lover up. I need to call with news that I'm almost home. After finishing his beer and settling the bill, he pulled his car back onto the road and dialed Lauren's mobile number. He recorded a voicemail. Hey dear, great news. The prep work has paid off and everyone has done an excellent job getting everything back on track. So, I'm about 30 minutes away from Charlotte and traffic isn't that bad. I should be home around the usual time. I hope this will scare her, David said aloud to himself. He headed home and upon arrival quickly packed a couple of bags and put them in the trunk of his car. Then he sat down and wrote a note to Lauren. Depending on how the night went, he wanted to have the option to simply escape without a major confrontation. He didn't know what was on the recording, so he didn't want a full-blown confrontation just yet. Part of his reasoning was also a desire to shock her to the same extent that she had shocked him when David called Lauren. She and her man, Rob, were in the throes of their second coupling of the day. Today was their last day together, and thanks to the extra runway provided by David's trip, they circled for the second time. They viewed it as a celebration or a victory dance. But now it seemed like a potentially careless move. Listening to the voicemail message, she muttered, "I need to move, Rob." It was David. He said he's already on his way back and will be home around 6 p.m. as usual. Well, at least you got the early warning phone call. Rob joked in response that as Lauren hugged him, said goodbye, and then quickly ran to the bathroom to take a shower. Routine and habits took over. Rob dressed and left the room as Lauren took her shower. He headed to the gym for his standard workout on the way home. Lauren was more concerned about David's early return home and his joyful mood about the project turning for the better. She thought he would come home late and probably burn out from meetings and travels, but he would likely want to be intimate tonight after missing most of the week. Still a bit nervous, she turned the corner, approached her home, and saw David's car already parked in the driveway. He made good time in Friday traffic, she murmured aloud, parking her Accord next to his new Civic. She thought he might want to pounce on her as soon as she entered, so she thought that a preemptive suggestion of a nice celebratory dinner might be a good idea. David was on pins and needles hearing Lauren's car in the driveway. This would be the first time he would see her since he learned for sure that she was a cheater. Bags packed in the car, the note prepared, all he needed was the recording pen. He sat in the living room to catch Lauren as soon as she arrived. "Hi, honey," Lauren exclaimed upon entering and seeing David rising from his chair. "Looks like everything went well. Why don't we go somewhere to eat and celebrate?" she asked as they embraced and kissed each other. "That sounds great, especially since I got home earlier. Why don't you go upstairs and change and I'll order a table somewhere," David suggested. Lauren readily agreed and tossed her work bag and purse on the table before heading upstairs to the master bedroom. David waited until he heard the shower start, then approached her purse and retrieved the pen. He pressed rewind and then play, heard the beginning of the lovers' conversation and quickly turned off the pen. "Well, that settles it. Time to get out of here," David said, pulling out his note for Lauren and leaving it on the table next to her bags. Standing in the doorway, David looked back at their home sadly, realizing that things between him and her would never be the same. Lauren hurried into the shower, quickly got dressed and descended with her still damp ponytail. She assumed he might be hungry after the trip and probably wanted to have love later. Not finding him in the living room, she headed into the kitchen and saw the note lying on the table. Taking it and starting to read, she gasped. "No, God, no. This can't be," Lauren muttered. "I know about your affair. I couldn't believe it was true, but your daytime meeting at the motel dispelled all doubts. You crushed my soul and I am so sad and angry that I can't be around you. I won't be here for a night or two while I try to gather my thoughts and then I'll call you to arrange a time for our conversation. Do not try to contact me or find me. Trust me when I say I should not see you until I'm ready. David." David left the house and drove to a hotel, settling into his room. He had dinner downstairs, ordered a double scotch on the rocks and reluctantly returned to the room to listen to the recording of Lauren's betrayal of their marital vows. Sitting in the chair at the writing desk, he turned on the recorder and heard the next sound as soon as Lauren entered the room. "Hi, Rob. I can't believe we've already finished this, both in meetings and in time. I didn't think we'd breeze through at least 5 meetings within 30 days. Hi, Lauren. Yes, I thought it would take more time. We spent much more time planning and preparing than executing. I suppose that's the result of good planning, isn't it? I guess. I have to say I'm glad it's over. The stress of hiding our affair is getting to me, and I understand why long-term affairs usually end in a catastrophic outcome. Yeah, same here. I know my wife has no idea, but I see how this could easily stop over time. You said David won't be in town until late tonight, right? I thought we couldn't celebrate today by having a drink together to mark our success and finish, so to speak, on high note. That was quite unconvincing, Rob. I'm kind of in, but rules are rules, so we won't do anything new that wasn't on the list. Lauren and Rob parted ways, and David heard the kisses and tender sounds emanating from Lauren. David listened to the entire 90-minute illicit merger between Lauren and Rob. 2 things struck him. Firstly, everything seemed normal, even ordinary, and David couldn't fathom why Lauren would risk her marriage for the same. David knew the affair was real. They had met 5 times, but he still had no inkling of the why behind it. Friday night was mostly sleepless for both David and Lauren. Eventually, David gave in, realizing there was nothing more to extract from the recording. Deciding to make use of the weekend and work-free freedom, he messaged Lauren, "I'll come to your place at 11 a.m. to talk, if that's okay with you." Lauren grabbed her phone upon hearing the incoming message ping, "Yes, please come home. I'm so sorry I've caused you pain." David ignored Lauren's response. Arriving shortly before 11 a.m., David trudged to the front door and rang the doorbell. "David, you don't need to ring the doorbell at your own house." "I just felt awkward walking in," David replied. "Shall we sit at the kitchen table and discuss the next steps?" Lauren was displeased with David's businesslike behavior and how this discussion was unfolding. Seated at the table facing each other, time momentarily stood still, and then David cleared his throat and asked the question that shook Lauren to the core. "Do you deny in any meaningful way the facts of what I've learned about your involvement with Rob?" Tears welled up in Lauren's eyes as she contemplated David's question and how focused and businesslike he was. In her view, this conversation was supposed to make David understand that nothing she did changed her feelings for him, and that her affair with Rob was just to prove their colleagues wrong. David only knew about the senseless love and nothing about Lauren's work conversations that led to Rob and Lauren's plan to prove their colleagues wrong. "David, before we go any further, you must first understand that Rob and I did this only to prove that we could have an affair and no one would find out. A few months ago, many of us at work were discussing affairs and how they almost always get discovered, as well as the tragic consequences they cause in marriages. The discussion split into 2 camps. Some thought any affairs beyond a one-night stand would inevitably be exposed. Others believed that keeping something more significant than a one-night stand secret would require some planning and, of course, a fair amount of deception, but it could be done. Rob and I ended up in the latter camp, and then we talked about the precautions that would be necessary." "Wait a second, are you saying this was just an experiment or game, just to see if you could have an affair that would go unnoticed?" "Yes, essentially that's it. The discussions about it turned into a game. The hypotheses we laid out over a few lunches just took on a life of their own, and eventually we detailed everything quite thoroughly. We were confident we could pull it off, but therein lay the hitch. To truly succeed, it meant that not a soul could or would ever find out about what we achieved. In short, we decided to test our plan, fully aware that Rob loved his wife as much as I love you, and that this game, if you will, meant nothing in terms of our relationship. We don't love each other, we love our spouses. We deliberately did nothing wrong. I used to have a faithful wife and now I don't. Yes, I guess now that you know, that's true. But if you had never found out, you would believe that I was faithful in my heart. It was meaningless love throughout this month. If you wanted me after Rob and I were together, I never refused you." "All right, Lauren, careless seconds, no harm done. I feel all warm and fuzzy now. Listen, I know you're in pain and you must feel terrible hearing what you did. I genuinely regret causing you pain, but I hope the details I've shared can dispel any doubts about my love for you and erase any thoughts about my feelings for Rob. No love, no feelings, it's just because it's a terrible thing now. Rob and I were very careful and we were sure that we would never be discovered and we never thought it would harm our marriages. Okay, so that's a long story to essentially admit that you betrayed me for a month, slept with a man who isn't your husband about 5 times, and fully intended to keep this affair a secret from me, your husband, until the end of our lives together. Going back to my initial question, I assume you're not denying any of the disgusting facts about what I've learned about your activities with Rob? Lauren slumped a bit under the renewed direct assault on her justifications. Yes, I suppose the facts are as they are, but the reasons behind them must matter. There was no passion between us, we just needed to prove that we could conceal an affair. It was meaningless for both of us. David grappled with the revelation, unsure of how to process the information he had just received. Between the thought that Lauren might have swallowed a bottle of foolish pills last month and the question of whether she always adhered to such absurd beliefs, I truly believe that part of your story. It doesn't seem like there was much passion between the two of you. Exactly, David. There was no passion. I know it hurts you, but I'm willing to do anything to atone for my guilt. Hold on, this is still nonsense. All this justification of it was just an affair is nonsense, and you must know that very well. We talked about being faithful when we decided to be exclusive. We discussed it in detail when talking about marriage. We exclusively dated for almost a year, and we talked again before I proposed. We specifically promised each other fidelity during premarital counseling and in our wedding vows. I don't recall a single mention of the escape clause. It was just an affair. Lauren saw that arguing with their history was pointless. David, you're right. We did discuss fidelity in detail. The point I'm trying to convey is that we are on the same page where it matters, considering our love for each other. I've only loved you for the past 7+ years and never felt the slightest inclination towards Rob. If playing Yahtzee with Rob 5 times a month could matter, we would have done that instead. It seemed more like the foolish pills were to blame for everything. And then David latched onto what Lauren had just said. So why didn't you just play Yahtzee or do something else, anything other than just an affair? You made it clear that engaging in this with Rob wasn't necessary. You also said that not a single soul would ever find out about this affair, so you could have done something else in that hotel room, and it would have looked and smelled like an affair, mission accomplished, right? To prove that you can have an affair, you didn't actually need to make love. You still needed to hide your activities from our spouses, so there was still a share of guilt in that. You still left work early, so you would still have to conceal it. Lauren's head tilted to the side as she contemplated David's challenge, and she felt herself quickly sinking deep. Lauren couldn't come up with any other justifications to overcome his assumption. Since no one would ever know whether they did it or not, it actually didn't matter. To win their little unspoken bet, they just needed to play out the affair with all the necessary secrets and hotel rendezvous. So why did you actually make love? I don't know, David. I never thought about that aspect of secrecy. We planned a secret affair to see if we could do it, then we decided to test our plan. It was just assumed that we would go all the way to the end. Lauren, all day today, you used the word just to minimize what you did, like saying just a second or just a little, when in fact what you did inflicts serious damage. It's the worst thing either of us could have done to our marriage. The fact that you don't see this yourself is possibly worse than you sleeping with another man 5 times a month. To you, it's almost like you slept with him only 5 times, so it's not a big deal. Well, it's very important to me, and at the moment, we haven't moved anywhere. So I'm leaving for now. David left, returning to the hotel. On Monday, he cancelled work and began contemplating Lauren's arguments. He couldn't believe that she thought so little of her fidelity, brushing it aside to win a phantom bet against coworkers who knew nothing. Enough of this, thought David to himself. I could sit here, torture myself, and try to find some explanation for her actions, but there isn't one. It wasn't just an affair, it was a betrayal of her commitments to him, her precious vows to keep those commitments to him forever, until death do us part. What ultimately surprised David the most was that, as terrible as his final decision was, he felt surprisingly at ease with it. He felt better than ever since receiving that email. Without losing hope, Lauren willingly agreed to another meeting the next day. "What's this?" asked Lauren, quickly scanning the stack of papers. "It's just divorce," replied David. Story 2. I was the one for him. Honestly, at one point, I felt like his love life had taken up a significant part of my wife and my conversations, so I mentioned not wanting to talk about it anymore. My wife was annoyed with me for saying that because he was her best friend, and she wanted to talk about it. I explained that it made me uncomfortable that she was taking up such a big part of his life in regard to his romantic relationships. She thought I was kind of crazy for thinking that way. We argued about their relationship, and I ended up sleeping on the couch that night. The following day, she told me that I had nothing to worry about with their relationship. He was her oldest friend, and nothing more than that. I accepted what she said and moved on. She never gave me any reason to believe anything else, and I had let my own insecurities get the best of me. She hadn't known the fiancé very well, so she stepped in to help with some of the wedding planning. It was something she had worked with before she quit her job, so she knew a lot of industry. At least once a week when she would come home after helping the fiancé, she would complain about how much she didn't like her. She was constantly telling me about how she thought their relationship wasn't going to last, and she wanted to try and talk to her friend about it because she didn't think they were a good fit. In hindsight, she was very jealous. I think she realized her friend was going to be less interested in her, so she didn't like the fiancé. As the day for the wedding drew near, she spent more time with her friend and fiancé, helping them prep for it. I saw her less and less, and I was getting frustrated. Not to sound like some chauvinist, but I worked between 8 to 10 hours a day, and a lot of times I had to take work home with me to finish up as well. While she was planning the wedding, I was coming home from work, cooking dinner, then cleaning up the mess. While she was out, for the past 15 years, she had been doing all of that. I was getting very exhausted because I felt like I was working a lot, and then coming home and taking care of the house. One night, my wife and the fiancé were in our living room, looking through some magazines and putting together some ideas. Her friend was there, somewhat disinterested in everything that was happening, though I could see that he was peeking over at my wife quite frequently. I was used to him looking at her. That was one of the main reasons I suspected he had feelings for her to begin with. But the fact that he was still staring at her longingly while he was engaged was rubbing me the wrong way out. A couple of days later, my wife told me that she was going over to their house to help with some preparations. About an hour after she told me, she left. The fiancé knocked on my door and told me that she had left a pair of sunglasses in her living room. I told her that I wished she'd have just let us know so my wife could have brought it over to her house that afternoon. She then informed me that my wife was not at her house, and we didn't know where she was. I asked her about where her fiancé was, and she told me that he was at the office working. It was a Saturday, and over the years that I'd known him, he had never been one to go above and beyond and show up for work on Saturday. Right away, I believed that my wife lied to me about planning the wedding to go spend time with him. I explained that to the fiancé, and she was enraged when I told her that. She thought the idea that my wife and her fiancé were together was preposterous. I was able to convince her to join me while we went to look for them. Thankfully, with our phone plan, we had a family GPS tracker installed, so I was able to find out where she was. The GPS tracker took us to an old strip mall where most of the buildings had been vacated decades before. We saw both of their cars in the parking lot and slowly approached them. When we drove up closer to my wife's van, we saw her and her friend inside having sex. They didn't notice us until I knocked on the window, and they both jumped and tried to cover themselves. The fiancée opened the door as soon as she heard the lock click and nearly dragged my wife out by her hair. I hadn't been expecting her to physically assault anyone, so I was able to separate them and get my wife away from her. My wife and her friend tried to explain what happened to us. They said that they just needed to figure out if there was anything there before he got married. I suppose she forgot about how she had been married to me for 15 years. If there had been something with him, did she plan on just leaving me and the children? All I knew was that she wouldn't have to worry about that anymore because I was going to be leaving her. The fiancé yelled at my wife's friend and called him just about every name in the book before throwing her ring in his face. I told my wife that I wanted her to go and stay with her parents while we figured everything out. I met with a lawyer as soon as I could because I knew we were going to have a difficult divorce battle ahead of us. When we got married, we signed a prenuptial agreement to keep all of our assets separate from each other, but when my wife quit her job, that changed a lot of things. Because she cheated, I didn't want to give her anything, but I was worried I was going to have to pay her spousal support. My attorney was amazing, and they were able to get me out of doing that. Unfortunately, my wife was able to keep the house. That didn't matter too much to me because I didn't want any reminders of the time she might have spent with her friend in the house. Even though she got the house, she ended up having to sell it for a portion of what was paid for it because she couldn't afford to upkeep it on her own. She ended up having to get a job as well, and I knew she was unhappy about that after spending years out of the field. We now have joint custody of our children, and they have a lot of resentment toward their mother for destroying their family. I don't want them growing up hating their mother just because of what she did to me, so I try to swallow my pride as much as I can, but sometimes it's hard. She tried to date her friend after everything was finished, but they both realized there really wasn't anything there after sleeping with each other. They weren't even able to get back to being friends. They ended up no longer speaking to each other. Right now, I'm just focused on re-establishing a life for myself with my children. I'm not too worried about dating. OP, I'm so sorry to hear that you had to go through all of that. You spent 15 years of your life dedicated to someone else who was very quick to throw it all away. It's such a shame that she showed her true colors to you so late into the relationship. Hearing about how close she was to her friend was somewhat of a red flag. That's not to say that men and women cannot be friends with each other, but in a lot of cases, you should trust your gut when you believe there are feelings there. It definitely sounds like he was having a hard time with relationships because he had feelings for your wife. Instead of shutting you down when you questioned it, your wife should have listened to what you said and done something to assure you they were just platonic. On top of that, it definitely does sound like your wife was jealous of the fiancé. Why else would she have disliked her more than all of the other women? As soon as her friend decided he wanted to be happy focusing on someone else, she decided that she did have feelings for him after all and couldn't let him be happy. I know having a divorce after all this time can be difficult too, but it sounds like you have a head on your shoulders and you're focused on the important stuff. I hope you and your children can recover from all of this and live a happy life in the future. Story 3. I, 24, male, and my girlfriend, 24, female, had known each other for years before we both confessed our feelings to each other and started dating. We were in the same friend group in college, and ever since I met her, I had feelings for her. But I was too nervous to come out and tell her about them. She actually ended up drunk messaging me one day, telling me that she thought I was cute and funny and she had a little bit of a crush on me. I made sure to wait until she was sober to respond so I could make sure she was sure about what she was saying. We have been together ever since my sophomore year of college. All of her friends thought we were a great couple. We were even voted as the best couple in our senior yearbook. It felt validating to have other people look at our relationship as something they wanted to work toward in their own lives. After college, we both moved in together and got jobs to start our lives. I felt like our relationship was thriving. For a long time, about 4 years into our relationship, my girlfriend came to me and told me that she thought she might be bisexual. I'm a very progressive person, so I didn't think much about it. I told her that I was there for her to talk to if she needed an ear, and that I was there for her when she told her family. Her family wasn't the most understanding at first, but they eventually came around after a conversation. We discussed what her sexuality looked like in our relationship. I have a lot of friends in the LGBTQ+ community, and I've heard a lot about the bisexual erasure that has happened within a lot of media and different communities. I never wanted her to feel like she was missing a part of herself by being in a relationship with a man. She assured me that she didn't feel that way at all. Because she was bisexual, she was happy being in a relationship with me. But with her sexuality, that meant that she was just attracted to women. Also, about a few months passed since we had that conversation, and everything was as normal as it ever was with us. Her revelation didn't have much of an impact on our relationship, though I was doing what I could to educate myself to make sure she was feeling seen and heard in the relationship. My girlfriend started to withdraw herself from me, and I was worried that there was something I was doing that was wrong. So I asked her about it. She told me that there was nothing that I was doing, but she was feeling a little off in general. She asked for a little bit of space, and I gave it to her. She stayed with her parents for the weekend, and I stayed home and waited for her to come back. She needed space, so I wasn't texting her and calling her or anything like that. I waited for her to respond to me before I did anything. When she came back, she was back to herself. I was happy to see that that little bit of space was enough to help her overcome what she was going through. I asked her about it the day she came back, and she told me that she was just not feeling like herself and needing some time to recuperate from that. I didn't question it any more than that. About a few weeks passed, and she was once again withdrawing herself from me. I didn't know what was going on, but if it was something to do with her mental health, I thought that she might need some help or someone to talk to, so I asked her about it again. She seemed surprised by what I was saying, as if she hadn't even realized she was acting a certain way. She just told me not to worry about it. She stayed like that for about a month. My mom came into town, and I took her out to lunch while my girlfriend ended up staying behind at the apartment. She asked me about what was going on with my girlfriend, and I explained everything to her. My mom was immediately concerned about it, but not for the same reasons I was. When I was young, my father cheated on my mother, and she never quite recovered from that. When I explained what happened, my mom immediately associated it with how my father acted while he was having an affair. As soon as she said that, I rejected the idea. There was no way my girlfriend would cheat on me. We had an incredible relationship, and I was always there for her when she needed me. There was no chance that she was cheating. My mom told me that she couldn't be sure either, but it was something that I should keep my eyes open for, just in case. She even gave me some tips on how to try and catch her if she was. I went home somewhat annoyed by the conversation that I had with my mother, but I couldn't get it out of my head. The more I thought about what she said, the more I realized there might be some merit to it. Even if she wasn't cheating, there very well could have been something that she was hiding from me. I didn't know how to my girlfriend about it. If there was something that she was going through, asking her if she was cheating on me may only make things worse. Later that night, we both laid down to go to bed, and I couldn't fall asleep after I heard my girlfriend snoring beside me. I snuck around her side of the bed and grabbed her phone to look through it. I felt guilty while I was pulling it off the charger. Neither of us had ever done anything like that before, but it was almost compulsive. The idea that my partner might be cheating on me had completely taken over my mind, and I couldn't think about anything else. I stepped out of the room and looked through her phone, searching for any signs that she might be having an affair. I found those signs in droves. One of the first things that I noticed was that in one of her folders, she had the Hinge app downloaded. Of course, I went on there and looked through the app, where I saw that she had been matched with several women. I looked through some of the messages, and one stood out in particular. There was a woman that she matched with whom they had both spoken about how they were in similar situations. They realized that they were attracted to women while they were in relationships with men, and they felt like they needed to explore that attraction. They both admitted to being in committed, monogamous relationships while also setting up a time to hook up. The first time that they hooked up together was when my girlfriend went to spend time at her parents' house when she told me she needed time apart. I was upset to learn that she had lied to me about what she was going through and where she was going so she could sleep with another person, according to the messages. They both enjoyed their time together and planned to continue their relationship. I found countless messages where they had been flirting and exchanging sexual messages with each other. I screenshotted all of the information that I found and sent the information to myself before deleting it. I knew right away that I was going to be ending things with my girlfriend. It didn't matter to me that she was exploring her new identity. We were in a committed relationship and she cheated on me with someone else. The next day, she told me that she was going to go to her parents' house again. She said that she agreed with me and thought that she wasn't acting like herself, so she thought it would be good to have some time alone again. I just nodded my head and said that it sounded like a good idea. When she left, I followed her. She went to a motel and shortly after, the other girl joined her there. I was able to get a couple of pictures of them kissing in the doorway, but everything else happened behind closed doors. I assumed that if she was taking the entire weekend to go back home with her parents, she would be spending the weekend with that girl, so I reached out to her boyfriend. I told him about what happened and what I saw, and shortly after, he called me. He didn't want to believe what I had to say, but I assured him that what I saw was true and that they were having an affair. We agreed to meet up at the hotel the following day. We were going to surprise them at the hotel and end everything with them. When he arrived, I knocked on the door and heard a lot of shuffling on the other end. My girlfriend opened it with a smile, but when she saw who was behind the door, it quickly faded away. The other girl was in the room lounging on the bed. Her jaw dropped when she saw her boyfriend standing at the door. They tried to explain what they were doing there, but I stopped them and told them that we knew everything that was happening. I broke up with my girlfriend right away and told her that I wanted her out of the apartment. The other man told his girlfriend that he wanted her to move out of his house and that he wanted nothing to do with her. I felt even worse when he asked for a ring back from her. I had no idea they were engaged. I walked away to go to my car, and my girlfriend chased behind me, trying to apologize for what happened. I told her I didn't want to hear anything that she had to say, but she tried to tell me that it wasn't cheating because it was with a woman. It didn't make any sense why that would be the excuse she gave. She was having sex with another person. I didn't care that it was a woman. I didn't think it was hot that she was sneaking around behind my back. She was my girlfriend, and I loved her, and she betrayed me. Honestly, I was offended that she would think I would be okay with it because it was a woman. She didn't know me at all, and that was cleared. I just drove away and told her one last time that I wanted her out of the apartment. She ended up to move back home with her parents, who were very surprised that she had cheated on me to begin with, and even more so that it was with a woman. I felt bad that she was going to have to live with people who weren't necessarily the most accepting of who she was, but at the same time, I didn't want to think too much about her. I just can't understand why she wouldn't talk to me about what she was feeling throughout the entirety of our relationship. I had gone out of my way to make her feel understood and heard, and she still took advantage of our relationship and betrayed my trust. Bob, I'm so sorry you had to go through something like this. It does sound like you did everything you could to make your girlfriend feel comforted and safe, and she threw it all away. You did the best that you could to comfort her when you thought she was going through something, and she took advantage of that to lie about where she was going so she could have an affair. I know there are a lot of people who fetishize women in relationships with other women, but regardless of that, she still cheated on you. Cheating is cheating, and it doesn't matter who it was with. You took someone's trust in you and broke it. This is an interesting case because I can understand how she might have felt like she was missing something by not exploring her identity more, but that's something that could have been discussed with you. Maybe even in this situation, it would have been better for her to break up with you and take some time to herself to explore before settling down, but it seems like she wanted the best of both worlds. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.